We're live.
Call this meeting to order. We'll call this meeting to order and we'll stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Commissioner Anselmi Dalton will take roll.
Thank you, Chairman. Robert Sullivan.
Yes.
Chairman Craig was you, Chairman Bliss.
Your microphone.
I think Chairman Bliss, thank you. Chairman Lawson,
Here.
Chairman Little,
Here.
Chairman Cooper.
Here.
Vice Chairman Ron Kelly,
Here.
and I'm here, Secretary, and Chairman Cox.
Here. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have four.
Thank you. Next, we're just going to have a brief introduction of our commission members and the members out in the audience. Just your name, maybe where you're from, and your job. So we'll start down there with Miranda.
I'm Miranda Russell, the Business Office Coordinator for Water Development.
Sheridan Little, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Water Division 2.
Ron Cayley, Commissioner, Water Division 1.
John Lawson, Water Commission, Division 1.
Mark Todd, Water Division 4, Rock Springs.
Lisa and Tony Dalton, Water Division 4, Fox Springs.
Larry Zucker, Water Development Commissioner, District 2.
Joma, Water Commissioner, Division 4. Quentin Glick, Wyoming Water Development Commission, Vancouver.
David Ray, Fiscal Manager, Water Development Office.
Jason Mead, Interim Director, Water Development Office.
Julie Gonzalez, Project Manager for the Water Development Office.
Barry Lawrence, Deputy Director of Planning, Water Development.
Bill Brewer, Deputy Director of Construction. Darren Cook, Attorney General's Office.
Maple Jones, Project Manager, Water Development Office.
George Mosher, Project Manager for Water Development Office.
Jody Pavlik, Small Water Project Program Manager, Water Development Office.
Greg Kerr, Director of the University of Wyoming Office of Water Programs. Kevin Traeger, Manager. Martin Stahl, the Chair of the Degree.
Jason Belly, Wyoming Water Development Office. Jay Smith, Wyoming Water Development Office.
Andrew Lynch, Water Development Office. Ferguson, Water Development Office.
Bill and Wade, Stantec. Hughes Larry, Water Development Office.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone for attending, especially those that traveled here to attend our meeting. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Cayley,
Move to approve the minutes on August 17th, 2022.
thank you. Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Do we have a vote to approve? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, same sign. Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the 2023 planning project consultant selection approval. We'll start with the level one projects. And
new development and
The first project is the Glendo Water Master Plan.
Chairman Cott. The selection committee for Glendo Water Master Plan Level 1 project. Thanks to consulting firms interviewed in the following order. ABI, Baker and Associates, Sunrise Engineering. I Commissioner Ron Silva, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with ABI for consulting services on the Glendo Water Master Plan Level 1 project. Further, the selection committee offers the following suggestions to the director during contract negotiations. Number one, set the scope alternate number one. To conduct $25,000. Number two, set scope alternate number two to collect their for $1,920.
Thank you, Commissioner Choma. Do we have a second?
second,
Thank you, Commissioner Kaylee. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Having a little bit of issue with our microphone. We're gonna try to switch it back to automatic, but while you guys are doing this, just kind of pay attention to the light. We have quite a few people probably online that are very interested in these motions. I noticed when you were reading your shut off, so we'll try to get it switched while we're talking, but try to pay attention to that when you're talking. It goes off, go ahead and push the button. And like I mentioned before. So if I'm talking right now, somebody else would push the button. So there's no interruption. So just keep that in mind. You have to push the button.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have the Newcastle Water Master Plan. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
The selection committee for the Newcastle Water Master Plan Level 1 project ranked consulting firms interviewed in the following order. 1, Inberg Miller Engineer. Number 2, WWDC Engineering. I, Commissioner Larry Super, move the director to be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Inberg Miller Engineers for the consulting services on the Newcastle Water Master Plan Level 1 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Zucker. Do we have a second? Commissioner Glick, sorry, Commissioner Glick. All right, is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, the Orchard Valley Water Master Plan. Do we have a motion?
Commissioner,
Mr. Cayley,
the selection committee for the Orchard Valley Water Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Number 1, Y2 Consultants. Number 2, ABI. I, Commissioner Ron Taylor, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Y2 Consultants for consulting services on the Orchard Valley Water Master Plan Level 1 project. Further, the selection committee offers the following stipulation to the director during contract negotiations. That Y2 Consultants include their scope alternate number 1 of an expanded field investigation, field survey, all valve and structure location at no additional charge.
Thank you, Commissioner Kelly. Is there a second on this motion? Thank you, Commissioner Dalton.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Director Mead.
I think these are set on automatic, but that's not. Anyway, we'll keep pushing the buttons for now. I thought it was back on automatic. Sorry for the interest.
Do you have further comments, Director Mead? Thank you. All those in favor of the motion of the Orchard Valley project, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the Manchester Water Master Plan. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman. I think I'm working.
Yes, Commissioner Little.
The selection committee for the Manchester Water Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Number 1, Dowell. Number 2, Engineering Associates. Number 3, Forest Green Associates. I move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Dowell for consulting services on the Manchester Water Master Plan Level 1 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Little. We have a motion. Now, do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Billy seconds. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Next, we have the Wardell Water Master Plan. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Haley.
the selection committee for the Wardell Water Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Ingrid Miller Engineers, number 1. Number 2, Forest Green Associates. Number 3, HDR. I, Commissioner Ron Cayley, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Ingrid Miller Engineers for the consulting services on the Wardell Water Master Plan Level 1 project. Further, the selection committee offers the following suggestions to the director during contract negotiations. Include air knifing exploration work for no additional charge.
Thank you, Mr. Haley. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Choma. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we're moving into the level 2 projects, new development. The first project is the CWRWS well field study. Do we have a motion?
Chairman,
Commissioner Duke.
the selection committee for the Central Wyoming Rural Water System Level 2 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Number 1, Engineering Associates. I, Commissioner Larry Super, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Engineering Associates for consultant services on the Central Wyoming Rural Water System well field study Level 2 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Stuker. Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Commissioner Lawson. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Next project. The Green River Rock Springs, Sweetwater County Joint Water Power Board East Side Zone Study.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Anselmi Holden.
Mr. Chairman, the selection committee for the Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater County Joint Power Water Board East Side Zone Study Level 2 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Number 1, Sunrise Engineering, Inc. I, Commissioner Lisa Anthony Dalton, move the director to be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Sunrise Engineering, Inc. for consulting services on the Green River Rock Springs Sweetwater County Joint Power Water Board East Side Zone Study Level 2 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthony Dalton. Do I hear a second?
Chairman, I will second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Stuker. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next project, we're moving into the level 1 projects rehabilitation. We'll start with the Casper Alcova Irrigation District Master Plan. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Little.
the selection committee for the Casper Alcova Irrigation District Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. 1, WWDC Engineering. 2, Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering. I move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with WWDC Engineering for consulting services on the Casper Alcova Irrigation District Master Plan Level 1 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Little. Do we have a second to that motion? Thank you, Commissioner Lawson. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the Ocean Irrigation District Master Plan. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Little.
the selection committee for the Goshen Irrigation District Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Number 1, Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering. Number 2, HDR. I move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering for consulting services on the Goshen Irrigation District Master Plan Level 1 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Little. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaylee. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Next, we have the Sidon Irrigation Master Plan. Do we have a motion? Commissioner Glick.
So that's the selection committee for Sidon Irrigation District Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. One for JUB Engineers.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick. Do we have a second to that? Oh, I'm sorry.
I, Commissioner Whitwood, move the director to be instructed to begin contract negotiations with JUB Engineers Incorporated for consulting services on the Sidon Irrigation District Master Plan Level 1 project.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick, and the second was Commissioner Anthony Dalton. Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Next, we move on to the Dillard Canal Master Plan. You have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, the selection committee for the Tillard Canal Master Plan Level 1 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Number 1, Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering. Number 2, JUB Engineers, Inc. I, Commissioner Lisa Anthony Dalton, move the director to be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Western Heritage Consulting and Engineering consulting services on the Tillard Canal Master Plan Level 1 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Anthony Dalton. We have a second. Thank you, Commissioner Glick. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we move on to the level 2 projects, rehabilitations. We have the Cody Canal rehabilitation. Do we have a motion? And I have the motion. The selection committee for the Cody Canal Rehabilitation Level 2 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Sage Civil Engineering. I, Commissioner Mark Cott, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Sage Civil Engineering Consulting Services on the Cody Canal Rehabilitation Level 2 project. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Selmy Colton. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the GVID Upper Sunshine Outlet Works Rehabilitation. Do we have a motion?
Chairman Cox.
Yes, Commissioner Choma.
The selection committee for the Graybull Valley Irrigation District Upper Sunshine Outlet Works Rehabilitation Level 2 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated. I, Commissioner Bob Choma, move the director to be instructed to begin contract negotiations with Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated for consulting services on the Graybull Valley Irrigation District Upper Sunshine Outlet Works Rehabilitation Level 2 project.
Thank you, Commissioner Choma. Is there a second?
I will second that motion, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Zucker. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the Lakeview Irrigation District Rehabilitation. And I have the motion. The selection committee for the Lakeview Irrigation District Rehabilitation Level 2 project ranks the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. Engineering Associates. I, Commissioner Mark Cott, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiation with Engineering Associates for consulting services on the Lakeview Irrigation District Rehabilitation Level 2 project. Do we have a motion? Well, that was the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the Shoshone Groundwater Supply and Transmission Project. Commissioner Click.
The selection committee for the Shoshone Groundwater Supply and Transmission Level 2 project ranks the consulting firm interviewed in the following order. As there was one, it's James Gore and Associates. I, Commissioner Clinton Blitt, move the director to be instructed to begin contract negotiations with James Gore and Associates for consulting services on the Shoshone Groundwater Supply and transmission level 2 project.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick. Do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Lawson. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, we have the Willowwood Irrigation District Rehabilitation. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Kaylee.
The selection committee for the Willowwood Irrigation District Rehabilitation Level 2 project rates the consulting firms interviewed in the following order. JUB Engineers Incorporated, number 1. Number 2, WWDC Engineering. I, Commissioner Ron Cayley, move the director be instructed to begin contract negotiations with JUB Engineers Incorporated for consulting services on the Willowwood Irrigation District Rehabilitation Level 2 project. Further, the selection committee offers the following suggestions to the director during contract negotiations. Accept scope alternate number 1, geotechnical investigation and analysis at a cost of $107,426, which is not to be started without prior approval of the office.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaylee.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Little. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Next, we move on. Next, we move on to the planning closeout memos.
Mr. Chairman, if I could real quick before we get to that, I just want to thank everybody on the selection teams for all their hard work. Project managers, a lot of effort into these, and obviously everybody's reviewing proposals. It ends up being a long couple of days, but I really appreciate that. Also want to specifically thank David and Miranda for some of the behind the scenes, and in particular Barry. Barry keeps everything running, as we all know. When it comes to these things, there's a lot that goes on that we really don't see. So there's a lot of effort into that. So I just want to thank everybody.
Thank you, Director Eden, and the commission echoes your comments. We greatly appreciate the hard work of all the staff and all the applicants. It's a big project, and we appreciate hard work. Going on, we're going to move on to the planning closeout memos. Jay.
Thank you, Chairman and Commission. I'm Jay Smith, Project Manager with the office, and I'm here to present the closeout memo for the Gillette Water System Improvements Level 2 projects. It received an appropriation of $150,000, and the final contract amount was $147,948, with the contract savings of $1,100. The purpose of the consultant was Morrison and Merrily, and the purpose of the study was to look at changes and the feasibility of those changes on operation and storage for the regional system. We received the final report and deliverable in August of 2022. 5 sites were identified as possible locations for new storage. 2 were recommended, and those recommendations were based on the fact that there's existing infrastructure and that lowers the cost. The estimates range from $5.3 to $5.6 million for those 2 sites. And the office recommends proceeding to the next level of project development upon the submittal of an appropriate application. And you'll find a motion on that proposed motion on page 20. Thank you, and I'll open for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you for the closeout report on the Gillette water system. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Anselmi.
Mr. Chairman, I move acceptance of the Gillette Water System Improvements Level 2 project report as being complete. And further, the WWDC makes the following findings relative to this project. First, that the commission recommend proceeding to level 3 of project development and public submittal of an appropriate funding application by the sponsor. Number 2, based on findings in the final report, the project is determined to be in public interest. And third, the project functions and services cannot realistically be provided by any person, association, or corporation engaged in private enterprise.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Sally Dalton, do we have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Quick. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, would be the Schmidt, Healy Reservoir closeout memo.
Morning, my name is Andrew, with Jason, Board Division. My name is Andrew. With Jason and the Board Division, and I'm project manager on this study. So this is kind of an interesting study. We looked at a lot of different things. First of all, let's start with the dollar amounts here. I guess we appropriated $268,000 in 2019. Our contract amount was $327 with a contract savings of almost $41,000. And then we were on the budget. So as you guys may recall, maybe some of you weren't here then, but in 2018, the Fair Wyoming purchased some water assets in Lake Smith. Lake Smith's actually owned by Johnson County, but one of the energy companies up there, Sasol, Clean Fuels, sold off some of their assets to about 62,000 acre feet of water in Lake Smith. These are listed there on the memo. I won't go through all of them, but and then there was Clear Creek Diversion Dam and pump station, and the re-regulation reservoir called Healy Reservoir, and a pipeline between them that the state acquired. So the goal of this study was to look at those newly acquired assets and see what we could use them for in the area, and maybe some operational efficiencies and expanded use, which I'll get into here in the memo. So starting with Healy Reservoir, it's about 5,000 acre feet total. When we purchased that, part of the original contract with that one being built, the energy companies that built it agreed to deliver irrigation water for free to the downstream irrigators, of which the governor is the first one. So, and that's done by pumping water back to the creek. So Healy Reservoir is off channel reservoir. It's converted like through the 100 horsepower electric pumps to put that water back in the creek so that the irrigators can divert it. So because there's an ongoing cost associated with that obligation, the state inherited that obligation to purchase those assets. Want to look at is there a way to get that water out of Healy via gravity, and that'll be cheaper in the long run. The way this is kind of set up, it's pretty complex. So we looked at quite a few different alternatives, how we could do that, like putting a pipe under the highway, or replacing the pump with more efficient ones, maybe modifying the infrastructure a little bit to siphon, or there's all kinds of different things that we looked at there. So if you look down in the memo a little bit, there's the cost there. We can kind of narrow those down to like 4 different options. There was a gravity outlet pipe at the northwest corner of the reservoir that would go under the highway. The range of cost there was 3.6 to 4.6 million just to build something like that. The other option was the gravity pipe sort of at the southwest corner of the reservoir that also would go under the highway. That was a little cheaper. But then as you can see there, replacing the pumps or continuing to use the existing pumps is actually the most efficient option. We look at life cycle costs and replacement, and we look at electrical costs and all those things over an expected lifespan. So the goal of this was just to see is the way it was set up the best way to use it, and kind of give the office some decision support tools here as we go forward with operations and maintenance. The other objective of this study was to look at ways to utilize Lake Smith water in the Tongue River Basin. the main focus was replacing out of priority diversions by Wyoming water users, while in Montana Paul was in place. Some of you may recall Montana, there was a case that was just recently settled with Montana v. Wyoming, and North Dakota was part of that as well. For a call that was made in 2004, 2006, that where Montana claimed injury, because Wyoming stored water out of priority according to the Yellowstone River Compact. So that case was settled with a monetary sum, but according to the report on that, the special master's report, a water award would have been a suitable means of compensation. So that's kind of why we did this study. Could we bring some Powder River Basin water over the divide and get it in Powder River instead of paying the money? Could we just replace the water with a pump station and pipeline? So we looked at a bunch of different alternatives again for that, how that might work. And we also looked at leasing water from the Northern Cheyenne tribe. They own some storage in Tongue River Reservoir. That would, just to clarify, Tongue River Reservoir is in Montana and it's owned by, I think it's the state of Montana. The Northern Cheyenne tribe has some water rights in there as well as irrigators. So one possible way, instead of replacing the water, would be a lot of the tribe water is not used every year. So that was maybe we could lease that from them and then we wouldn't have to replace it. So we coordinated with the tribes on the cost might be for that. Again, that's in this table here. And then we also looked at an exchange in the upper Piney Creek Basin. But currently there's some up by Story, Wyoming, there's some trans-basin diversions at Kearney Lake, and it's the town of Story that bring Piney Creek water over into the Little Goose drainage. And they're fairly small and there's not a lot of water up there that it would be potential for exchange with Lake Smith water. So that was dismissed as not being feasible. So some of the alternatives we looked at for the Lake Smith water was building a pump station at Lake Smith, kind of two different locations there, and then a pipeline. We looked at some different alternatives and how to get that, you know, between Lake Smith and Prairie Dog Creek or Little Goose Creek, which alternative might be best. So there's a range of costs there, and you can see the dollar per acre foot there is pretty high, but not quite as high as building a pipeline out around down Piney Creek towards Yukos and Claremont and around dropping it in Goose Creek and Fifth Street. That was quite a bit more, but it is possible. So we wanted to kind of cover that. And then finally, there's, as you guys may know, there's been quite a few studies done up there. The city of Sheridan's been looking at Lake Smith water as a future water supply for the municipal users. And we wanted to make sure we included that. So we, and actually the engineering firm was Engineering Associates, or called Intech. So Dave Ingles up there in Sheridan, he's done a lot of study for us on this subject of city of Sheridan water. And so we pulled that into the study to look at it. Can we bring raw water up from the Lake of Smith and provide municipal water? There's a cost there for that. So is there any questions before I move on? That's kind of a lot.
Are there any questions? Andrew?
Mr. Chair.
Sure. Kaylee, I'm sorry.
I just have a question. I don't know, maybe Jason can answer this, but do you remember approximately what that monetary amount was for that settlement to Montana?
It's about 20,000.
Oh, okay. Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I believe it, we're based on about $15 an acre foot for replacement. Which equated about 20,000.
Appreciate that. No other question.
Are there further questions from the commission? Andrew, please.
So all contract requirements were met. The final report was delivered earlier this year. There's some links on here if you want to report online. We recommend accepting the final report. Provide a lot of good information on what we use these new required assets for and manage it more effective, more cost effectively. Due to the SCOTUS judgment, there's possibly the number of Wyoming water users with post-1950 rights up there could be detrimentally affected if Montana makes a call. So depending on future weather patterns and runoff quantities, there could come a time when additional water in the Cumberland Basin would be relevant and valuable. So we recommend that they keep this information in the study at hand as a decision support tool when that need arises. And also, as the city of Sheridan is looking to move forward potentially with bringing Lake Stickwater into the Cumberland Basin for their municipal use. Also with the Eva Reservoir, certain components there are nearing the end of their design life, so it's good to know what our options are to replace those and keep that functioning so we meet those legacy obligations to deliver shareholder water on Clear. With that, I close the motion there on the final page.
Thank you, Andy, for a very thorough report. Commissioner Click.
I move acceptance of the Lake Smith Keely Reservoir Utilization Level 2 project report as being complete, and further, the Wyoming Water Development Commission makes the following findings relative to this project. That the commission recommend the office coordinate with the municipal and agricultural water users in the Tongue River Basin, the state engineer's office, governor's office, and the state of Montana to continue to evaluate the policy or quantity, timing, interest, and need for replacing out of priority diversions by Wyoming water users in the event of a Montana call and or other uses in the Sheridan area. Also, the office utilized the information provided in study as a decision support tool for the operation and maintenance of the risk.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick. Do we have a second?
Second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Stuker. Is there further discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Andrew. Next, we have the Town of Jackson Well Number 9 Groundwater Exploration Grant Closeout memo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. My name is George Mosher. I'm the project manager for the Groundwater Exploration Grant Program. For your consideration today is a closeout memo regarding the Town of Jackson Well Number 9 Exploration Program. This was initially considered and approved by the commission in September of 2020. At the beginning, the original project cost estimate was $135,000. Typically on the groundwater exploration grant program, those are funded at a 75%, 25% match, with the commission bearing the 75% portion. So the contract amount is $101,250. Due to some changes in water routing and testing during the course of this project, the costs of the project increased quite a lot. The total project costs at the end of this ended up being a little over $400,000. So the Town of Jackson bore the expenses totaling $310,087.91. Consequently, there is no contract savings under this particular contract for the final amount of $101,250. The grant funds were to drill and complete a new municipal water supply well. Town of Jackson had identified that there were some additional water needs within one zone. They call it Zone 3, which is kind of on the southwest side of town. It's in Rangeview Park for those of you that might be familiar with the area. A 6-inch test well was completed in the fall of 2021. That test borehole went to 107 feet below ground surface. Their primary target, like most folks in that area, is the Snake River alluvial aquifer. They were kind of concerned that there would be iron and manganese at higher than acceptable values. But the water sampling that they did during test hole completion confirmed that those weren't really going to be too much of an issue for them. So they decided to proceed with drilling a production well and testing that. The initial identified depth for the production well was 105 feet in total depth. During construction, though, they had some problems with saturated sands that kind of kept migrating into the borehole. So ultimately, they were only able to install the screened interval and the total depth of the well to 102 feet below ground surface. The cleanup efforts went well. Some of you may remember that I previously showed some pictures of sand collected in the bottom of some jugs and how that was cleaning up over time. That actually was the Jackson well. So they were able to get that to clean up to relatively small and low amounts of sand. And we're able to pump test that for a long-term pump test of around 1,800 gallons per minute. So highly productive area. The drawdown at 1,800 gallons per minute is a little over 60 feet of drawdown, or excuse me, 60 feet of water level. So they're pretty confident that they can secure at least that much water from the borehole if necessary. The project report was completed in August of 2022. It's a rather large beast for water quality samples and all of that stuff that's toward the end of it. That project report is available on the website with the link provided there at the end of the closeout memo. The report recommended that Town of Jackson proceed with securing appropriate state engineer's office water rights, as well as DEQ water quality division permits. The report recommended that construction work proceed to install the pumping equipment and transmission piping, as well as probably some on-site treatment to address long-term concerns for anaerobic bacteria, iron-reducing bacteria, sort of things. Within the closeout memo, you find a general well location map of as-built diagram to kind of confirm if there are any construction questions about the final well that was drilled. The office advises that the project is complete and that the goals are achieved. We recommend acceptance of the final report submittals. The proposed motion for your consideration you'll find on page 28 of the PDF. With that, I would, of course, stand for any questions that the commission might have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, George, for the excellent report. Does the commission have any questions concerning this project? Hearing none, do we have a motion? Commissioner Glick.
The accepted the Town of Jackson Well 9 groundwater exploration grant project as being complete.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick. Do we have a second? Commissioner Toma with the second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on, we have the planning contract amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director.
So first, amendment is Clear Creek Storage Study Level 2 Phase 2 Amendment number 7. If you recall, a couple years ago, we had our August tour up in the Bighorn Basin, and we toured the Upper Bull Creek Reservoir site. So this is really pertaining to that particular reservoir that is of interest. This project's been languishing a few years, and the main reason for that is because, as we discussed, it's the price tag on that is well over $100 million. We've really been trying to understand how some of these federal funding programs are going to play out. One of them that we had our eyes on were the Word in 2020 bill, which would have provided a significant amount of federal funding. Unfortunately, this legislation was passed, but there was never any funding put to that actual program. So we're working with our congressional delegation to try to work through that. But in the meantime, there's some things that have come through the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, for small surface and groundwater type storage projects, as well as there's an existing NRCS program. So I think we're going to probably move forward with one of those. So this amendment really just extends the contract expiration date with Stantec Consulting Services who's been our contractor, our consultant on this project, really from the beginning, the level 2 study. And extends that an additional 2 years from the end of December this year to the end of December of 2024. So with that, I would ask if there's any questions, and really the additional work that we would be looking to complete under the contract would just be to really get this beneficiary group organized, because right now the project is being sponsored by the Conservation District up there, and they're not an eligible sponsor as once we get into the level 2 phase 3 permitting and design. And so it's going to need to be kind of a conglomerate of possibly folks that form in an irrigation district potentially, or some kind of a legal entity in the Clear Creek drainage, the French Creek drainage potential. There's potential for municipal water in this reservoir. So it could be like I said, a conglomerate of folks that we need to form an entity, and we'll help them with that once we identify a funding source and, you know, help them put together applications and so on and so forth. So with that, I'd ask if there's any questions, and if not, for your favorable consideration of this.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions for the director? Hearing none, we have a motion regarding this project amendment.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Kaylee.
I guess we just need a date moved on this, so my motion will be that we extend the term of the contract through December 31st of 2024.
Thank you for that motion. We have a second. Commissioner Lawson, second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Second amendment is amendment number 2 to the consultant contract for Levitt Reservoir expansion permitting liaison services. This particular project is also with Stantec Consulting Services, who again have worked with us through the level 2 feasibility studies, and then they were kept on board during the permitting process with the BLM, the EIS, and so on and so forth. And really that was to bring along information from our feasibility studies to the NEPA process, because during those EISs, we have third-party contractors that are hired to really take an unbiased look at all the potential environmental impacts during those NEPA processes. And those are really something we have to follow based on federal requirements, that third-party contractor. So we have received the record of decision, obviously, on the Levitt Reservoir expansion. This is one that's the budgets came in pretty high when we bid it out last year, and we're hoping we could probably go to construction this next year. But as part of the record of decision for the NEPA, some of the water quality components required an adaptive management plan under the Clean Water Act in 401. So we want to keep Stantec on board in case we need to do any additional water quality sampling in advance of construction, or if we just realize any potential benefits that we could realize in advance of construction to keep that contract, I guess, active at this point. So the actual motion for the amendment would again extend the contract from December of this year till the end of December of 2024. And the motion can really just be to approve the amendment number 2 to the Levitt Reservoir expansion permitting liaison contract, if you so choose.
Thank you, Director Mead. Do we have a motion regarding Levitt Reservoir expansion permitting liaison amendment number 2?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Anthony.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we accept amendment number 2 to extend the current contract expiration to the end of 2024.
Thank you, Commissioner Anselmi. We have a second. Commissioner, with the second, we have further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The last planning contract amendment it should be, is everybody able to keep up on the, book pretty well? I'm sorry, this is our second meeting doing this. So this last one is amendment number 8 to the Little Snake Supplemental Storage Level 2 contract. with Stantec Consulting Services, and it's again to extend that from December 31st of 2022 to December 31st of 2025. This one is otherwise known as the West Fork Reservoir Project, and we are working with the NRCS, the Forest Service, the Corps of Engineers, as well as a number of other cooperators, and just really getting NEPA kicked off. This is somewhat of a unique and complex NEPA process just because of all the federal agencies that are involved, either through Clean Water 404 Act or funding or just land management with Forest Service. And so it's taken a little time to get things off the ground just because everybody has their own kind of mission when it comes to the federal agencies and trying to bring those all together. A while back, of course, because there's potential beneficiaries in Colorado, there was a bit of a pause on this project for a few years. And so again, it's just the NEPA starting. We anticipate it'll probably take a couple of years to finish that up, and then if things look favorable and get a good record of decision, of course, design will occur after that. So really, again, this is just to keep Stantec under contract to provide any data gaps that are requested to be filled in from the federal agencies during the NEPA process. So with that, ask if there's any questions.
Are there any questions for the director regarding the Little Snake project? Commissioner Ansel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I was just wondering, I know that this is, I think it was about a $40 million cost a long time ago. I don't know what the cost is now. And I think there was concern that Colorado was benefiting and how much they would pay, that they were benefiting some of the farmers downstream. Is that correct? And has Colorado said that they'll participate, or do we have any further information? I know this is just a time extension, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the original estimates on this from late 2017 was about 80 million. And we know that has gone up probably fairly significantly at this point. That would be one of the data gaps that we charge Stantec with updating is what's the current cost estimate for the NEPA process. In regards to the participation and potential beneficiaries, with the West Fork Reservoir project itself, it could serve roughly 19,000 irrigated acres. About 75% of those would be in Wyoming, 25%. Those are rough numbers. I think it might be 73 or 77, 23, but roughly a quarter of those acres are in Colorado. The Savory Little Snake Water Conservancy District is the Wyoming side, and the Pawtucket Conservancy District is the Colorado side. And really, as we've probably talked in the past, the Little Snake River meanders back and forth across the state line. I can't remember 20 times before it actually goes into the Yampa River. And so both districts jointly applied for funding through the NRCS, and that's the Watershed Flood Prevention Operation Program, and received, I believe it was $1.25 million for this watershed planning / NEPA process through NRCS. And so they both provided letters of support. These are neighbors that just happen to be on, the opposite side of the state line, but they all live in the same community. So, and we just had the cooperator kickoff meeting, and that very question came up. And the Savory Little Snake Water Conservancy District Chairman Bob Davis assured that there's a lot of interest in purchasing this water, and we'll have to continue to work through that. But where the hopes are, if everything is favorable, then NRCS would continue to provide funding through the SWIFTO program, and it's roughly $25 million. So a portion of the Colorado versus the Wyoming portion, since they're jointly applied, that would probably take care of some of the funding. I'm sure there's many discussions to come, considering that's a small amount of a $100+ price tag.
Are there further questions for the director regarding this project? Hearing none, do we have any motion?
Mr. Chair.
Chairman.
Commissioner Kaylee.
Yes, I move that we amend this contract, the second sentence of section 3 of the original contract to read, the term of this contract is from June 9th, 2008 through December 31st of 2025.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaylee. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? Is there further discussion? Hearing none, All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We move on to the small water projects, All Creek subdivision, fire water storage. Scope change.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was a project that was sponsored by the Teton Conservation District in 2021. They have, at the time, had a project that had a letter of support from the county fire marshal for a cistern to provide water storage to a subdivision that didn't currently have any fire water supply. With the idea that they would make it available countywide anytime fire management folks needed a water supply, they could come pump water out of the cistern for whether it be a wildland fire or subdivision fire or whatever. So that was the proposal. They had a letter of support at the time. Fast forward to this year, they're getting designs ready and they submit the designs for review of the county. And says, well, we would rather have a well instead of a cistern. So they called us and said, what do we do? And I said, well, it's still an eligible expense, but because we told the commission we're building a cistern, we need to let the commission know that you guys would like to change it to a well. So that's why we're here today, just to make sure that we would keep you guys in the loop with these kind of changes. So in front of you, I think you've got a handout, page 45 in the notebook, that talks about the new estimated total project cost and updates the project description in the recommendation that was provided originally. It doesn't change the grant amount. Obviously, it's well above our $35,000, 50%. So nothing's really changed here, except we just want to let you guys know that we're going to drill a well instead of putting in a cistern. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jody, for a complete report. Are there any questions for Jody?
Chairman,
Commissioner Glick.
require a motion to change from cistern to a well.
Mr. Chairman, we would like to have the commission act on this and just approve the scope change if we would.
Commissioner Glick, would you like to provide a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we change from allow them to change from a cistern to a well, and that is a no cost change. That was it at a no cost in order.
Thank you. Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Commissioner Little, with the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, thank you, Jody. Next, we have high savory grazing sublease.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little background on this. When High Savory was built back in the early 2000s, to complete that, wetland mitigation was required just below the dam. And for the state of Wyoming to be able to complete that, we entered into negotiations. Part of those negotiations were with Lee and Donna John, who owned a state grazing lease, or I guess had access to that grazing lease just below the reservoir and south of the I guess eventual reservoir. And so as part of that, we acquired that grazing lease from Lee and Donna Johns. And it's roughly 2,800 acres. We needed around 650 acres for our wetland mitigation. And then we turned around and subleased the remaining portion of that, those grazing acres, roughly 2,200, back to the Johnses. And unfortunately, in 2014, I believe it was, Lee passed away. His wife eventually sold the ranch to a longtime ranch manager, Matt and Natasha Myers. And at that time, we turned around and we subleased, or I should say, transferred our sublease to Matthew and Natasha Myers, because that's part of their operation. It keeps them whole. They need that grazing, the grazing acres to be able to run their operation. I was approached by Matt Myers here over the winter, and with him talking to his neighbor, they realized that Matt's deeded acres are closer to Rollins, and his neighbor, Pat Sheehan, who owns the Hogeye Ranch, his deeded acres are very close to the sublease around High Savory. So they're looking at the idea of basically swapping grazing leases. Matt would take the Hogeye Ranch's BLM grazing lease up north, and Pat Sheehan and the Hogeye Ranch would then take on the sublease around High Savory. So keeping with the wishes, I guess, of the original Lee John's interaction and this being part of the operation, I'm supportive of this transfer. It would help out Matt and Natasha Myers and as well as the Hogeye Ranch. So what's in front of you today is just a new sublease with, again, the Hogeye Ranch. It's for the portion that we can sublease back. It's roughly 615 AUMs. An AUM is an animal unit month, which is basically the carrying capacity for a cow-calf pair. I won't get into the details of that. I don't know it very well, but I can explain it. It might get confusing. Anyway, this is basically the same terms that we were subleasing this land to Matt and Natasha Myers. And then right behind this, let's see what page it's on real quick here, is a termination agreement. Of course, if we're going to sign a new sublease, then we have to terminate the old one. So on page 67 would be then the termination agreement with Matt and Natasha Myers for them to get rid of the lease. So if we have your favorable approval today, we will continue to work with the Surface Leasing Department of State Lands and submit the new sublease form along with this contract or sublease agreement, and they'll take it in front of the Board of Land Commissioners for final approval. So with that, it has to be any questions.
Are there any questions for the director regarding the High Savory leasing sublease? Mr. Director, so the motion did include a lease termination and authorization of the new sublease. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. It might be cleanest to just do two motions, one for each.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Kaling.
I move that we terminate the lease with the Myers so that we can get the new lease.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaling. Do we have a second? Okay. Sure, Stan, only with the second, hearing further discussion, no further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do we have a motion on approval of the sublease?
Mr. Chairman, I will move that we approve the sublease to Hogeye Ranch LLC.
Thank you, Commissioner Rule. We have a second. We have a commissioner from Commissioner Glick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on, project updates, La Pearl Dam funding.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick update with our interactions with Bureau of Reclamation. As you recall, we had been waiting for a letter back from the Bureau of Reclamation Commissioner Tootin to the Governor of Wyoming, Governor Gordon, obviously, with some response. And we received that after the August meeting, shortly after the 1st of September. And basically what that letter response to Governor Gordon was that the funds that were appropriated through the bipartisan infrastructure law were in fact non-reimbursable, or in other terms, grant. So they won't be loan funds. So that's good. And then the other question was, what is the La Pearl Dam eligible under the legislation that was passed? And Chase Tavelli provided a good amount of information to the Bureau of Reclamation. They reviewed that, sent it up the chain to the DC office, and came back with, in Commissioner Tootin's letter, that yes, it indeed was eligible. So that's another good response. And the next steps are, we are in contact with the Bureau quite often, and we're trying to schedule a meeting with the Financial Assistance Office of the Bureau of Reclamation to really get into the details of who's the agreement going to be with, the sponsor, La Pearl Irrigation District, or the state of Wyoming through the Water Development Office, and what are going to be the terms, all the nitty gritty details. So we're anticipating that should be scheduled here in the next couple of weeks. And at this point in time, I believe the Bureau of Reclamation has appropriated roughly $5 million for fiscal year 23 for CARE Act projects. Not specifically LaPrel, but at this time, it's mainly LaPrel with our understanding. So that's just a short update. Just want to let you know we received that response from Commissioner Tooth from the Bureau of Reclamation. So I'd ask if there's any questions on that.
Are there any questions for Director Mead? Thank you, Director. Very thorough report. Next, we're moving on to discussion.
So, Mr. Chairman, the only discussion item we wanted to talk about is there was a Colorado River Working Group meeting the other day out in Rock Springs, and in advance of that, I've got Brandon Gephardt, state engineer, that just joined me here, so appreciate that. We both received a phone call from Senator Hicks in regards to Colorado River issues and everything that Brandon is dealing with along with a lot of his staff here ever since he left water development. So the idea was to basically look into conveyance loss associated with ditches and canals up in the Green River Basin, because I think we have a pretty good handle on consumptive use of the crop, but this conveyance loss is also going to need to be part of the equation when it comes down to potential future curtailment if the, I guess, weather patterns continue like they are. So I might turn it over to Brandon for a second just to talk about how a conveyance loss study, maybe before I do that, I think the idea is to try to come up with some regional numbers that could be applied if regulation has to eventually occur or get into demand management situations to really understand what the credit the state of Wyoming should be receiving by turning ditches off. And that could be complex. We've had some outside discussions about this already, but maybe I'll turn it over to Brandon for a few minutes and talk a little bit more after that.
Brandon, welcome back. We're eager for your words.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Great to see you all again. Thanks for having me, and Jason, thanks for including me in this conversation. Yeah, so Jason kind of explained how we got to the position that we're in now with this potentially proposed project. And some of the value that I see in a study like this, particularly in our portion of the Colorado River, which would be the Green River and the Little Snake Rivers. Curtailment is a slightly different animal than our annual regulation and administration of water rights that we do. It deals only with the consumptive use component of it. And so we're trying really hard to figure out all of the consumptive uses in the basin, and in the event of a curtailment, what the conserved consumptive use is when we take our administrative action on priority regulation. And so if you think about a canal that has a seepage loss, that seepage loss leaves the canal, but it doesn't necessarily leave the system. Only a portion of that water actually leaves the system, and that's either through evaporation or consumptive use of plants along a ditch, or potentially aquifer recharge if it's crossing something like that. But normal seepage eventually ends up back in the system. And that's not what we're calculating, because that's not the consumptive use component of the water. So we're trying to get a handle on what is consumed by some of these conveyance systems. And what is the benefit if we improve the efficiency, say if we line a ditch or ditch to pipe, what is the consumptive use savings of that? Another component that I think is beneficial to the water users, if you have a long ditch and a portion of the water users off that ditch have a different water right, and they would be curtailed. Let's say somebody down on the end of the ditch is not curtailed, and they're still able to irrigate with their water. Well, what happens, regulation, is we shut off some of the flow in that ditch. And so the person at the end, he loses the benefit of having a full ditch and carrying his water down to him. So with the restriction, if you say he has a 1 acre foot water right, it may take 2 acre feet of water to get it to his point of use. In a curtailment situation, we're gonna have to shut that second CFS or second acre foot off. So what is the reality? What is the real flow that he gets at the end of his ditch? And I think that a study like this could help answer that question and can help make help these irrigators and water users make decisions on whether they're going to have enough water to raise a crop in a given year or not. So that's two of the benefits that I see to this. I think there are many more, but also I understand, having tried to look at canal seepage and study myself, these are difficult and complex projects. I will say, luckily, there's a lot of people a lot smarter than me that can figure this out better than I could. So, but that's some of the benefits that I see of this type of a study. And I know that there are some concerns from Jason's perspective as far as budgeting and that I'll let Jason talk to, but happy to answer any questions on my thoughts of this study.
Thank you, Brandon. Are there any questions, Brandon?
Mr. Commissioner.
Commissioner Kaylee?
Brandon, I was gonna ask, I'm having a little trouble wrapping my brain around how that would work. How would you study that loss? Did you have any insight on how that might happen?
Well, one of the things that we talked about with the working group, I have thoughts, but I don't know if they're the right thoughts. So my assumption, or maybe one of the avenues that a study like this can go, would be to, there could be multiple phases. But I think the first phase is to get a collective group of people, including a potential consultant, at the table to talk about that very issue. Where do we study? What do we study? And how do we study? I think that there are a lot of ideas that could be in a work group type of a setting that would play into how to do that. So I could envision a first phase being a substantial scoping study, if you will.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Director?
Chair,
Commissioner Super?
I do have a question on this. So where's the benefit factor of this? In other words, does this change our curtailment? Would it benefit the curtailment to the Colorado River Basin? Mr. Chairman, we done these,
I know.
would there be a beneficial factor?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman and Chairman Super, I do think there could be, because we would have, the idea would be to have a defensible consumptive use number to take to the other states and to tell them that when we shut off a ditch or partially shut off the ditch, we're actually saving this amount of consumptive use just along the ditch, not, and then whatever we shut off in a field, that's an additional consumptive use. So being able to identify a savings and conveyance, I think we could make a defensible argument that we would have to shut off less users if we're conserving water by shutting off ditches. Thank you.
Director, did you have a question or a follow-up on that?
Mr. Chairman, my follow-up is really more to Commissioner Keenan's question about how do we get our arms wrapped around this. Maybe Brandon alluding to some concerns. I don't know if there's so much as concerns, but just challenges that we should expect. And I think we've discussed those a little bit already, but you know, we've got different systems. The west side of the Green River versus the East Fork, New Fork, Black Fork. Geology, not to leave out the Little Snake River. The geology is going to be different from one place to the other. So I agree with Brandon's kind of a scoping analysis to make sure the good thought that goes into how we approach this will be money well spent. And really to determine the selection of the study area, what data do we need to collect and how do we collect that data? Because we could collect data on big canals, little canals, early in the season, when we're at 100% capacity, we know ditches, you know, suck up a little more water depending on the time of the season. So there are going to be multiple measurements, and we're trying to come up with numbers that would apply to certain geology and certain ditches in certain areas. How do we keep all that information in one spot? Do we need to complete some modeling or what have you? So it's not a real straightforward study, and it's going to take a lot of thought to get that done. So maybe it makes sense to start small instead of trying to bite off the entire Green River Basin. Don't know. We can have those discussions. The other thing that we've discussed a little bit, I know, is our funding availability. And currently we have roughly $30 million with between account 1 and account 2. Most of that's in account 1, but as we've done in the past, we're probably going to need to be transferring some of that between accounts. And with the applications we received both through planning and construction as of September 1, we're looking at $50 to $60 million of requests. So almost double what we have for funding. And then we add this potential study on top of that. So at the Colorado River Working Group, I did also talk about this there, and that if this seemed like a valuable effort in the minds of those folks that attended that they should be reaching out to their local legislators to help them understand our budgeting issues and situation. And I harken back to last year in the supplemental water bill that Senator Hicks proposed that funded GID and LaPrelle and Fontenelle water. So more to come. I'll be reaching back out to Senator Hicks to have some of these same discussions in anticipation of the November meeting and how we might handle that either in some kind of recommendation at the November meeting or what. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up that this is being discussed. That I've asked if there's any questions for me or Brandon again.
Are there further questions?
Chairman,
Commissioner Glick.
Brandon, is this, it's kind of hard to understand how you're gonna track the water. You're gonna be a lot more, people out measuring during the peak season, or is it gonna be in the, you know, when are you gonna track most of the water?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Glick, that's a good question, and we did have some discussion on that in the work group earlier this week. Kevin Payne, our Division 4 Superintendent, has made some estimates that if curtailment were to occur, there are over 2,500 head gates in our portion of the Colorado River, and his folks right now are accessing about 70 a day. So based on his map, he feels that if we were into a curtailment, he's estimating an additional need for an additional 30 people at least to just administer a curtailment. So there will be a significant lift, and we will be required to ensure that shutting off water uses is conserving the consumptive use, and that it is getting to our state line and ultimately to Lake Powell.
Are there further questions? I have a question. I guess the time frame. Get going as soon as we get the money. I mean, curtailment. When could that happen? Just some thoughts in that area.
So based on the best information we have available to us now and giving the projections, based on that information, the earliest we can expect, or we're thinking of a potential curtailment is in the year 2028.
Thank you. For the study, start next year, is that kind of the thinking, or it could be a couple of years out yet?
Mr. Chairman, I think we'll have more discussion on that in November, but if there is some funding that we can find to start off on this study, and depending on whether that's a large study or a start off small, we could probably go through consultant selection during the legislative session this winter and have a consultant at least chosen by the time we get to the March meeting, which is when we typically would approve contracts that we just talked about today. So we could get back on track with that. And then a notice to proceed next April to actually start the work. So you would most likely be in that time frame of when folks are starting to charge up their ditches. And depending on, you know, if we're talking about trying to get one season's worth of measurements or a couple seasons, you know, might be looking at either an early or mid 2024 kind of completion date on that first study, or if we want to get a second season of irrigation, then you'd be looking at late 24 or early 25 to kind of get your arms wrapped around the results of what we're seeing. So
Thank you. And just one other follow-up. I know there was a meeting on Tuesday, and I believe that was yesterday. And, you know, I know Commissioner and Pauline, myself, we're from Rock Springs. Are there ways to, are there summaries of this meeting or ways to, you know, maybe view type of thing?
Mr. Chairman, the meeting you're referring to is the Colorado River Working Group. And we did not record that meeting, and we typically don't. However, there is discussion going on that may be making future meetings into a webinar type of a version that people can view and potentially save it, go back and look at. But if there are specific things you would want, I'd be certainly happy to answer questions, and maybe we can provide some of the presentations that we provided. You lose a little bit of the explanation just in looking at the presentation, but we could certainly help it if that's something you would like to look at.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I do have another follow-up in my question. I guess with the irrigators, or could they be reimbursed for the water use if they didn't use, in other words, leave the ditch closed? I'm sure they all paid for the amount of water that the fire pipe is determined. Could that be something that could be done? I guess if I was an irrigator and really didn't use it, I'll close my gate. Say, okay, I'll get back, I'll let go whatever I don't use. Is that a consideration if they didn't open it up?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Suker, yeah, that is a consideration. And currently, the Upper Basin states are working with Congress and the Bureau of Reclamation, Secretary of the Interior, to utilize some of the Inflation Reduction Act funding. If you remember, there was $4 billion of that funding with a priority on addressing the issues in the Colorado River. And so the reauthorization that we're working on is for originally in 2014 or 2015, the Upper Basin set up, or the entire basin set up a system conservation pilot program. And that would be voluntary reductions in water use that would be compensated. And so we're working on a reauthorization of that program and using some of the IRA funding to help compensate for folks who are voluntarily reducing their water. We are also working on the feasibility, we have been for several years, the feasibility of a demand management program, which is a similar program to the system conservation. That one of the major differences between the two, and system conservation, if you conserve the water, it is not shepherded to a location to the state line. It becomes system water. So you can't guarantee that that is going to prop up elevations in Lake Powell, for example. But with the demand management program, it's likely that that would provide some authority to the upper states that they would be able to shepherd that water
And again, and this is a voluntary compensated program. So yes, we are working on that to provide a soft landing for people who are willing to voluntarily give up their water. And the system conservation, as I said, becomes system water, but ultimately if we develop a demand management program, we would be able to shepherd that water down to either Flaming Gorge, which we question if that's our authority to shepherd it there, or all the way to Lake Powell. But then with that demand management program, we're working on how we would keep Wyoming's name and Wyoming bucking horses on that water so that we could use that in a potential curtailment situation.
To follow up on that, years ago, the federal government used what they call a soil bank. And that was administered through the federal government. And they paid you not to sow a crop on your field. Been a long time ago. I don't know when it went away, but is that something that people also look into? Instead of, it was a very economical situation, I guess, at years when they thought the wheat crops were greater than the demand at that time. And they just paid something similar, if that could happen. That way the user, which we have more than just what we paying for his water. Because the crop is standing out there. And if you use that water, the greater value, then what he's gonna give up on the water charge. So is what I was saying. But anyway, just kind of a food for thought on that element that was there, worked very well. And could be done again.
And Mr. Chairman and Chairman Zucker, I think that the intent of a system conservation or demand management program essentially is the same as that. The value of the water that is being established is yet to be determined, but it's the intent that that value of water is enough for somebody to forego irrigating a portion or all of their crop. So it's essentially it's a similar concept to what you're describing.
Okay, well, thank you, because I think that's the right direction. If you can get there, I think it's a win. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zucker and Brandon. We also like to thank the state engineer's office for looking out for the Colorado River compacts, but all the other compacts across the state. I know the Platte and Tonkin, there's a myriad of them. It's a complex job, and we appreciate your hard work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there are 7 compacts in the state and 2 decrees, so lots of work. Thank you.
Chairman.
Commissioner Glick.
If we were to move forward with this pilot project, and then if, like Larry was saying, if we were compensating them for the crop, also the water, to not, or what their losses would be, I guess on average what they would make off actually utilize the water and getting a crop. If you don't use your water for so many years, they could take you to court, say you were not using your water. Are we gonna have some kind of protection where that's not gonna be an issue?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Glick, that's a really good question and point. And both of the programs I mentioned, system conservation and demand management, one word I forgot in describing those is temporary. And that is the very reason why it's got to be temporary, is to avoid the abandonment of water. And so we're working diligently so that we are involved in the process so that we can help from a state engineer's perspective, help set up a program that does not jeopardize people's opportunity through abandonment. So it would be a temporary problem. That is one thing that we are very aware of and very cautious about is jeopardizing individuals' water rights by participating in this program. Thank you, Commissioner Glick and Brandon. I guess, are there further questions for Brandon? Hearing none, we'd like to thank you, Brandon, and welcome back anytime. Thank you for coming home. Appreciate it. It's great to see you all. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Next, in further discussions there, Director.
Mr. Chairman, unless anybody else has any, that's all I have for discussions.
Further discussions, Commission. Hearing none, we'll move on to future meeting schedule.
Mr. Chairman, the November meeting, again, the 1st through the 3rd, I believe that's a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday timeframe. Of course, up in Casper, we've booked the Thyra Thompson State Building there in Casper. This will be our first time using it. We've been to a JAC meeting there, and it hopefully will accommodate everybody that shows up and not be too cramped, but we'll find out. And then, of course, the December meeting that we always have to review the omnibus planning and construction bills will be December 5th and 6th, followed by the Select Water Committee meeting on the 7th. So any questions on that? That's the standard protocol to review the meeting schedule in the future.
Hearing no further questions, thank you, Director. And before we adjourn, I think this is appropriate. We have one of your staff members is potentially leaving, correct? Mike Robertson. And we'd like to thank Mike for his hard work. Over to you.
Having a little get together at Uncle Charlie's on Friday afternoon around 4 o'clock. If any of the commissioners are still around, you're welcome to come down and celebrate. Mike's moving to Steamboat Springs, so I don't feel too bad for him. But he's been great to work with and really provides a lot of invaluable time to our office and the projects we worked on. So we appreciate this service to us.
Thank you, Director. The next item is number 13. We have a motion on that.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that dare to oppose say, thank you.